Yesterday on our other channel, where we talk about economics, we did a video about the drastically reduced GDP, which is basically the amount of wealth that a country creates, the gross domestic product, between 1930, the Great Depression, the 1940s, which was World War II, up to the 1950s. And this was a terrible economic state. It was at the last fourth turning, and it was one of the worst times in human history. So we thought, especially from an economic point of view. But if you look at GDP then, which is how much we were producing, how much wealth individuals had, and compared it to now, let's say from the mid 1990s to today, we are almost 50% lower GDP. So the amount of wealth that we have is almost cut in half compared to then. And we were talking about from an economic lens yesterday, but what it actually could be is through a psychological lens. If you haven't read The Brave New World, there is a pill called the Soma Pill, which is basically just like an instant dopamine hit that everyone's taking every single day. Anytime you start to feel any slump, what do? You take the Soma Pill and you feel fantastic. What is that today? There's unlimited Soma pills because of technology. We've seen GDP start to get cratered once technology has really come about, because what can you do? Men can go online, they can watch porn, release their instant dopamine rushes. Therefore, they don't have to strive to do better, produce more goods and services, and get a better mate. You can, anytime you're feeling sad or you get home from your terrible job, you can just watch Netflix or TikTok or any of these instant gratification websites forever. And you feel good doing that. The problem lies, and the problem in Brave New World is people are wildly addicted to the Soma Pill. If you take it in super small dosages, maybe you'll be fine, but you cannot do these things to the extremes and normalize them. It's like smoking cigarettes. You cannot say smoking cigarettes is good, everyone should do it, because objectively it is not good, and there are health side effects. Today, people don't even know the side effects that they're taking when you're watching YouTube all day. And I can assure you there are tremendous side effects.
Yeah, Josh, so the way I would kind of frame it and approach it like this is, if you think about it, wet streets do not make it rain. Rather, raining makes wet streets. And the reason I mentioned that is that when you have a system that ameliorates the effects of laziness, in other words, it makes it very easy to be lazy, then you have an option where, or you have an option that should be very, very expensive, which is no longer expensive. That is to say, if you're a guy, what's the point of trying to make yourself better if you can, just have a little alone time? Or from the lady's perspective, what's the point of trying to make yourself be, a better potential wife if you can just get a bunch of social media validation or whatever from a bunch of thirsty guys out there? And kind of the way I would frame this, and not to drag this too much into the realm of economics.
Yep. Justin, before you do that, I'm going to also add another book into this category, which is Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza. Those two processes that you just described, Justin, that the men being too easy, they can just go masturbate, and the women, they can get that instant gratification through social media. When you post that and you get that gratification, your brain cannot tell the difference, because your body is producing these cortisone and a bunch of different chemicals that go into your body, and your brain feels the same way when you get likes on Instagram as it does when you are having a long-term husband, or when you have sex with an actual mate of a long-term spouse. Your body can't tell the difference. And same thing with the Soma Pill. You think it's good because you feel this reaction. Why would a good feeling not be good? But too much of a good thing is horrible.
Yeah, so there's a concept called inversion. It's kind of the thing I would jump to on that front, and that's why I said it's not that wet streets do not make it rain. The raining is what creates the wet streets. And so my point is that the inversion of all of this is that the payoff that one gets or whatever, right, from, let's say realizing or in the natural world, the payoff that one would get from realizing the culmination of a successful romance, it's there. And so in that case, you could argue that it is the system's working like it's designed to be working, right? A man and a woman get together, they get together long enough to know each other theoretically, form a relationship. The relationship leads to intercourse leads to kids, and then the relationship stays stable enough so the kids themselves can become stable members of society if kids are there, whatever, right? So that's, you could say, like the normal order of things. But when you reverse it, and all of a sudden you take what should be the result of the success, or it should be the result of the man making himself be good enough to be selected by a mate, by a woman. And likewise, what would make a woman be attractive enough to be selected by a male? So when you have like these two things going together, the natural result, again, the payoff, successful intercourse, whichever way you want to say it, that should be kind of like the end goal. But if you invert everything on its head, you spin it around, it's actually the backwards it's actually backwards. I think this is to your point. And so when you make it so easy, too easy to kind of get this, you create a synthetic event that, as you say, Josh, your brain can't distinguish between the real thing. And because it's seen that, your brain kind of gives you the pass to say, oh, listen, I've been successful, blah, 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 blah. And basically kind of, saps your will to, from the male perspective, to do better. Or you could say from the lady's perspective, it kind of, saps their will to, try to understand, like, well, how can I be a better companion or whatever, right? Now, again, if somebody wants to do that, by all means, like, do it. But my comment is, I made this comment yesterday on the video, is if you want to smoke cigarettes, that's fine. But we just need to have like warning labels on the cigarettes so people kind of know what they're getting into. We don't want to have doctors pushing this, or, some sort of like, I'm not saying there's some like grand social conspiracy, to try to gloss over and ignore this stuff. But I do think we have a tendency, a fatal flaw in humans, to kind of look at stuff we don't want to look at. And at the end of the day, like, why on earth would we want to look away from anything that we're getting a tremendous amount of pleasure from? But anyways, that's kind of, the long story short there. The concept of inversion, where you're basically taking what should it be at the very end, the pleasurable event, and you're swapping it around. It now becomes at the very beginning. And instead of being the result of, let's say, virtuous action, it is now the source for invirtuous reaction. Maybe some way to think about it.
Yeah, when you take the gratification and jumpstart it to where you get it right now, you don't get to suffer. And I know what you're saying. Why would I want to suffer? But the pain that you encompass during the process is what makes the reward at the end so much better. And and we are completely missing that in society today. So it makes sense why economic activity is much lower, because there's no need for people to go into the workforce, because we have a higher standard of living. Because if you want, right now we are living in a day where let's go back a few thousand years. If you were the most richest king of all time, you could have all the women in the world in front of you, and you could do all of these magical things. You could go see the best plays that were at your disposal, and you could only do that because you were the richest king. No one else would be able to. But today we have that on the touch of our finger, and we have it unlimited. Quite literally, people's entire goal with YouTube is to try and keep you on the platform longer, just sucking your attention away from things that happen in the real world. And I don't know what will reverse this, because I'm seeing videos, Justin, of this ChatGPT, which is taking over the internet, because it's this new AI technological advancement, which is going to completely override the need for anything, because now computers can basically almost make videos exactly how people would want them, knowing the algorithm, knowing what human psychology would do from start to finish, organically, artificially just sucking your attention into it. And
it gets even worse. Hold on a second. It gets even more fun from that. Imagine all the data you've left online in your digital footprint. And imagine if you had something like an AI that could like aggregate all that data. And then just imagine if how well that could tailor, whatever, you wanted to see to what you wanted to see. That's pretty impressive. Just a side confession. I was using the ChatGPT thing to do accounting transactions. It is really good at doing journal entries. So that was my guilty sin with it. But what I would also say is this, is that one of the old memes you see on the internet from, I don't know, was it maybe about 5-10 years ago, was, just learn to code, or whatever, right? Well, you want to know what's learn to code? Those AIs are learning to code. So I really hope our software bros are going to have a full plan, but that's not going to hit on our we're in.
And why that's absolutely a good thing. You want technological advancement. You cannot overdo it from a personal level. And I think that's what Brave New World really teaches you, because the hardship is really what makes things worth it in the end. And right now, the day that we live in, we have no hardship, and that's probably why we have to experience it, and at least in the economic sense.
So I'm going to go into risky water right here, Josh. So we did a video on the other channel talking about contra liabilities and kind of the relationship between assets. So let me say this in more of the social context or whatever, right? When you create a representation of something on paper, or like in the mind on this side right here, the question is, from like God's perspective, is there or is there not a corresponding asset in the real world? Let me say that in English. Is there or is there something that we've done in the real life? That is to say, Can we make more widgets at the factory? Can we do more services or whatever? Do we have more children that are going to be successful? In the case of, male, female mating and dating or whatever, right? And if the answer is yes, then you could say, well, wait a minute, this asset that we created, or excuse me, this thing that we created in our mind is actually substantiated and backed up by stuff in real life because we can see it. There's a tangible thing over there or whatever, right? But if that's not the case, and if you can not infinitely, but if you can greatly postpone any reconciliation for that, rather than creating something that's an asset, you create what I would call a contra liability. I'm not trying to wade into banking logic here, but my point is that it's like a faux asset. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's something that you're getting all the credit on paper for, but in reality, it's not going to be there, and probably you're going to have hell to pay at the end of the day. Let me see if I can make a simple analogy here. The high of an addict, someone starts using cocaine, fentanyl, or whatever, right? Some sort of, drug designed to get a high off of or whatever, right? It is true, when they do that first hit of the drug or whatever, right? They will probably feel very, very good. That's just the simple thing. But that feeling of good that, they otherwise might have earned from, completion of a successful task, completion of, a worthy goal, whatever, right? You would make the argument that it's unearned. And this is kind of why I say the concept of this contra liability, the concept of not virtue, but the concept of the reward has been inverted, where the reward should come after you've done the task to earn the reward. No, it's the entire thing's being backwards. It's been flipped on its head. You have the ill-gotten reward, the contra liability, that's masquerading as an asset, and then that's going to go through into the future to create the problems of withdrawal, or you need a greater, in the context of someone doing heroin or whatever, right? You stop using and have withdrawal, you've got to have more and more, you get the same effect, and so on and so forth. And not to hog the stage here, but to your original point of starting this video, if you have a system that makes it very easy to get heroin, Soma, whatever you want to call it, and you have an entire society that pushes it, and you have, an entire apparatus that, if not necessarily directly, indirectly, very strongly discourages people from kind of asking these hard questions, you have an entire system that's been stacked by Adam Smith's invisible hand to encourage people not to think these thoughts. So,
yeah, it's almost like we are raising just a lost generation. I mean, you talk about that in Japan from an economic stance, but I think we're seeing that in the US from a practical stance, because at what point are these AIs going to be able to do anything that any job online can do better? Because it's going to happen. And then what will you need? You will need skilled people. And how many of those do we currently have? And how many of them are under the age of 30? So
yeah, it's not a reason, or I don't think it's a coincidence that you seem to see all the elites, and let me choose my words carefully here. I do not mean to say I have direct evidence of Klaus Schwab or any of that ilk going, thinking about ways to depopulate the species. I am not trying to I'm not trying to say that. But what I will note is that one of the recurring themes that keeps coming up and up and up is this concept of population control by the elites. The Georgia Guidestones, which have now been destroyed, someone boofed them, I don't know who, they basically clearly said, etched in rock, that they wanted to maintain the Earth's population at 500 million humans or whatever, right? If you and I can poorly foresee that AI increase will suddenly mean that we can make much more with much fewer people, and there's no reason to think that this won't be the case, then we're going to have a lot of extra people who are going to have who are going to be competing for the resources of a planet who are no longer be needed. And again, just to be clear, I don't know of any direct elite plan to say this, but I do note that if you and I can think of it, surely the elites are thinking of it, and you see these echoes. Again, I would say the Georgia Guidestones and probably others that they kind of tip their hand just to say, well, we kind of told you what's going on. Hint: when they say maintain the world with 500 million people, or if they say we're looking to reduce carbon or whatever, right? Here's what they don't tell you: you are the carbon they are looking to reduce. And then you might say, oh, but Justin, they need us. No, they don't, especially if AI comes online. They might need some, but they're going to need far, far less, I think. And that probably means you, not needed.
Yeah, me and Justin included.
Yeah. But I'm good at being useless. I'm really good at being useless. So maybe one of the best.
So this is a lot of doom, and we've talked about all the problems with this, but there will be great advances as well. Because right now we have pretty much any information that you could possibly want at the touch of your fingers. I could look up, I would say, the deep inner workings of the banking system, but as me and Justin know, you really can't look that one up. But pretty much anything that you could fathomably want to know, you can find out, and that is something that we have never had before, and that is one of the best things that we have at our disposal. But just don't overdo it with the nonsense.
Yeah.